Zane had always been an explorer at heart, the kind of person who would rather get lost in the wilds of an unknown planet than stay in the safety of a crowded city. He had worked as a survival expert, venturing into dangerous, unexplored worlds where no one else dared to go. But nothing could have prepared him for the planet Storym, a world that was beautiful yet deadly, full of alien life forms and mysterious technologies. It had all started a few weeks earlier when his ship, the Phoenix, had crash-landed on Storym. A storm of unimaginable force had torn through the atmosphere, and before Zane knew it, the once stable ship was plummeting through the sky. The ship's AI had tried to guide them to a safe crash landing, but even the best technology couldn't stop the violent winds that had sent them spiraling down. Zane had been lucky to survive the crash. His body had been battered, bruised, and his limbs ached from the impact, but he was alive. As the smoke cleared from the wreckage, Zane knew his mission was clear. He needed to survive. But he also needed to get off this planet, find help, and somehow fix the ship. He had been here alone for days now, scavenging through the wreckage for supplies, using his skills to find food and water, and trying to repair what was left of the ship's communication systems. However, this planet had more in store for him than just survival. As Zane ventured deeper into the alien forest, looking for resources to patch up his ship, he stumbled upon something unexpected: an attack. A group of Xylan, a species native to this planet, had been ambushed by hostile invaders. The Xylan were a proud, technologically advanced species, but even they weren't immune to danger in their own domain. Zane had watched the struggle from the shadows, carefully assessing the situation. The Xylan were fighting back fiercely, but the invaders were numerous, armed with high-powered weapons that put the Xylan at a disadvantage. Zane's attention was immediately drawn to a figure within the group, the princess of the Xylan, Selena. She was standing her ground, leading her people with bravery, her eyes full of fire. But despite her courage, she was overwhelmed by the attack. Zane could see her injury as one of the invaders got too close, cutting her arm with a sharp metallic blade. Blood spilled onto the ground, and for a moment it seemed like everything was about to end in chaos. Zane knew he couldn't just stand by and do nothing. He had to act. He pulled himself up from his hiding spot, ignoring the pain in his body, and ran toward the fray. He reached the first invader, a tall, armored figure, and knocked him off balance with a well-placed strike. Zane's background in survival training and hand-to-hand combat gave him an advantage, even in unfamiliar territory. The fight was fast and brutal. Zane managed to disarm one of the attackers, using their own weapon against them, before turning it on the rest of the group. He moved swiftly, his mind focused, cutting through the chaos with his quick thinking and tactical advantage. Zane's instincts kicked in, and he found himself in his element, fighting for survival. It wasn't long before the last of the invaders had been driven off, and the battlefield quieted down. Zane was panting heavily, his chest rising and falling with each breath, sweat dripping down his forehead. He had managed to save them, but at a cost. His own body was sore from the exertion, and he could feel the adrenaline beginning to wear off. His eyes found Selena once more, who was still standing but now visibly weaker. The princess was injured, her arm wounded badly, and she was struggling to remain conscious. Zane rushed to her side, his hand reaching out to support her. "Are you all right?" Zane asked, his voice calm despite the chaos around them. He was used to tough situations, but this felt different. This wasn't just another survival scenario. He was looking into the eyes of someone who was important, someone who would remember him. Selena, her face pale from pain, looked at him with gratitude. She nodded weakly but didn't say anything. Zane's heart skipped a beat as he noticed how strong she was despite her injuries. It made him realize how high the stakes were, not just for him, but for the entire world he had crashed into. Zane gently helped her to her feet, and the two of them began moving away from the battle scene. He knew he had to get her to safety. The Xylan had their own technology, their own healers, but in the moment, Zane was the only one who could protect her. The sun was beginning to set, casting a reddish glow over the forest as they walked. The Xylan warriors who had survived the attack were gathering, but they were wary of Zane. Humans were not common in this part of the galaxy, and they were even less common on Surilin. The princess's rescue didn't go unnoticed, and there was no doubt in Zane's mind that this act of bravery had changed things, for better or worse. By the time they reached the Xylan encampment, Selena's wound had been tended to, but Zane could still see the exhaustion in her eyes. He stayed by her side, silently watching as her people began discussing the next steps. Zane, now a stranger in their midst, wasn't sure where he stood. All he knew was that his survival depended on his ability to adapt, and the Xylan were not a people known for their mercy, especially not towards humans. Hours passed, and Zane was left to his thoughts. He sat apart from the rest of the group, knowing that his presence was a curiosity to them. He didn't expect to be welcomed with open arms, especially after a single act of heroism. Yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between him and Selena. She had looked at him with more than just gratitude. There had been something deeper in her gaze, something he couldn't quite place. As night settled over the camp, Zane lay on the cold ground, his mind racing. He had to figure out what his next move was. His ship was in ruins, and he wasn't sure if anyone was even looking for him. But more than that, Zane had the distinct feeling that he wasn't just stranded on this planet by chance. There was something bigger at play here, something he couldn't yet see. Before he drifted off to sleep, Zane couldn't help but wonder about Selena. Who was she really? And why had he, a simple human, been thrust into her life in such a dramatic way? All he knew was that his actions today had set something in motion, and there was no turning back now. The morning light filtered through the dense canopy of trees, casting long, soft shadows across the Xylan encampment. Zane woke up, his body still aching from the battle the previous day. He had barely slept, his mind racing with thoughts of the events that had transpired. He had saved the life of the princess, Selena, but what did that truly mean? Was this a simple act of heroism, or had something much bigger begun? The Xylan were not a race to be underestimated. They were powerful, intelligent, and had an almost mythical reputation. They had technology far beyond anything Zane had seen before. Yet in the chaos of the previous day's attack, he had realized something important. The Xylan were just as vulnerable as anyone else. Despite their strength, they could be overwhelmed by sheer numbers, and they had their own weaknesses just like humans. As Zane sat up and stretched, he saw Selena across the camp. She was speaking with the Xylan queen, Valora, her mother, and the two seemed to be in a deep conversation. The princess was sitting upright, her arm in a sling, but her posture was still proud, despite the pain. Zane admired her strength, but he also saw something else, an uncertainty in her eyes, as if she were trying to make sense of the same questions that filled his mind. Zane stood up and began walking toward the center of the camp, where the Xylan were gathered. The warriors, their faces unreadable, gave him wary glances as he passed. He could feel the tension in the air. An outsider like him wasn't easily trusted. The Xylan were known for their pride, and while they had accepted his help for the moment, Zane knew it wouldn't be long before they started questioning his place among them. Queen Valora, a tall and regal figure with glowing skin and piercing blue eyes, noticed Zane approaching. She turned to face him, and her gaze was as sharp as any weapon. Zane stood tall, trying to remain composed, but he couldn't ignore the sense of unease that settled in his stomach. "You are the one who saved my daughter," Valora said, her voice calm yet filled with authority. "Tell me, human, what is your purpose here?" Zane didn't flinch at her question, though he knew the weight of her words. He had saved Selina's life, but that didn't mean he was welcomed into their society. "I didn't come here with any purpose other than to survive," he replied, keeping his voice steady. "My ship crashed. I'm stranded. I did what anyone would do, helped where I could." Valora's eyes narrowed slightly, as if weighing his words. She didn't speak for a long moment, and Zane could feel the weight of her scrutiny. Finally, she nodded slowly. "You've done more than just help, human. You've shown us that you can be of use, but understand this, we do not trust easily. We do not welcome outsiders into our world without cause." Zane nodded, fully aware of the gravity of her words. "I understand," he said. "I'm not asking for anything from you. I just need to repair my ship and leave this planet, but if I can help in any way, I will." Queen Valora studied him for a moment longer, then gave a slight nod. "We shall see. You may remain here for now, but be aware that the Xylan are not easily swayed. You will need to prove your worth if you wish to earn our trust." Zane didn't argue. He knew that, for the time being, he had to earn their respect. It wasn't about heroism or saving lives anymore. It was about survival, about showing them that he could contribute. And it wasn't just about him anymore. He felt responsible for Selina, and he had a strange sense of duty toward her. As the days passed, Zane worked on repairing the remains of his ship, but the task was slow and difficult. The technology of the Xylan was far beyond anything he had ever encountered, and their tools were intricate and unfamiliar. He quickly realized that if he was going to fix his ship and leave, he would need help from the very people who had, at first, been so hesitant to trust him. Zane spent most of his time with the Xylan engineers, trying to understand their advanced technology. He watched them work, learning as much as he could. The Xylan were efficient, precise, and incredibly skilled. But even as he watched, Zane couldn't help but feel out of place. He was a human in a world far different from his own. The difference between him and the Xylan was stark, and every day he spent among them, he felt more and more like an outsider. Yet, Selina continued to keep him company. Despite her mother's initial wariness of him, the princess seemed to have a different view. She spoke with him often, and the two grew closer with each passing day. They shared stories of their worlds, Selina's life as the princess of the Xylan, and Zane's journey as a wanderer and explorer. There were moments when their conversations felt like an escape from the harsh reality of their situation, as if, for just a moment, the differences between them didn't matter. One evening, after a long day of repairs, Zane sat by the campfire, staring into the flames. Selina joined him, her presence quiet but comforting. She sat down beside him, and for a while neither of them spoke. The sounds of the forest surrounded them, the chirping of alien creatures, the rustling of leaves in the wind, but it was a peaceful silence. Finally, Selina broke the silence. "Why did you help us?" she asked, her voice soft but full of curiosity. "You didn't know us, you didn't owe us anything." Zane glanced at her, surprised by the question. He had expected many things since arriving on Surulin, but he hadn't expected her to ask this. "I guess. I just couldn't stand by and do nothing," he said slowly. "It wasn't about who you are. It was about what was right. You were in trouble and I could help." Selina's expression softened. She had always been the strong, commanding figure, but in that moment, Zane saw a different side to her, vulnerable, unsure, human in a way. It was as if the walls she had built around herself were beginning to crumble, just a little. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything." Zane nodded, feeling a strange warmth in his chest. He didn't know why, but he felt like he was starting to understand her, understand the complexity of the Xylan people, and maybe even his own place in their world. But things were far from simple. The more time Zane spent on Surulin, the more he realized that the planet's problems weren't limited to just the threat of the invaders. There were deeper issues at play, political tensions within the Xylan society, old rivalries and power struggles that Zane could barely comprehend. The longer he stayed, the more involved he became in their affairs. He had saved Selena, but now he felt like he was part of something much larger, something that could change the course of history for both the Xylan and humans. One day, as Zane and Selena were walking through the forest near the camp, they were stopped by a group of Xylan warriors. These warriors, unlike the others, didn't seem welcoming. Their faces were hardened and their eyes were full of suspicion. "Princess Selena," one of them said, his voice low and cold, "we need to speak with you." Selena glanced at Zane, then back at the warriors. "What is it?" she asked, her voice firm but still carrying the weight of her injury. "This human," the warrior continued, eyeing Zane with disdain, "has done much for the kingdom, but he is still an outsider. He cannot be trusted." Zane's heart skipped a beat. He had expected some resistance, but not so openly. Selena stepped forward, standing tall, her face hardening. "This human saved my life," she said, her voice echoing with authority. "He is under my protection, and I will not stand by while you question his loyalty." The warriors hesitated, and for a moment the tension in the air felt thick enough to cut. Zane looked at Selena, amazed by her bravery. She wasn't just the princess of the Xylan, she was a leader in her own right. The warriors eventually bowed their heads, stepping back. "As you wish, princess," the leader said, his voice reluctantly respectful. As the group of warriors retreated, Zane let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He turned to Selena, his mind spinning with questions. She had stood up for him. She had chosen to protect him, even in the face of her people's opposition. "Thank you," Zane said quietly, his voice thick with gratitude. Selena didn't smile, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. "I don't do this for you, human," she said, her tone steady. "I do this because you saved my life, and because I believe that you can help us." Zane nodded, knowing that he had a long way to go before he truly earned the Xylan's trust. But one thing was clear. He had a place here now, and that place was tied to Selena, the princess who had shown him what it meant to fight for something greater than oneself.